We got Patrick and Casey today. This is Components Live, your Friday rundown to wind down the work week. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. The guys have quite a bit to talk about today, and so I'm going to pass it right over to them.
Yeah, and you tried to add something to the docket 30 seconds before we push the live button, so we'll see how that goes. All right, so this week because we're titling our episodes now because we think that that's good for search engine or something like that. So this week our title is where's the value in AI, which is meant to be kind of provocative, kind of a punchy title. But it's not really about is there value in AI? It's very literally where is the value in the stack and the implementation of AI? And the article we have referenced for this is a New York Times article that's about 2 weeks old now, and it's talking about the AI startups and the funding environment and all that kind of stuff. So the first thing that I want to dive into is the conversation around is AI and are these technologies platforms or are they something else? And if they are platforms, where's the value in the stack?
When you say these things, so we're talking specifically about the things built on top of the major models. Are those things platforms, right?
No, the major models themselves. Really, are the major models platforms? And then do the things built on them qualify as applications? Are they thick enough? Are they adding enough value to really be applications, or are they just repackagings?
Yeah, I mean, I clearly think that the models are platforms, but they're very rapidly evolving kind of unstable platforms. And it feels like most things using them are not adding a ton of value on top of it. They're a thin wrapper. I mean, what's your experience been?
Well, so I like Bill Gates' quote on this, which actually goes back way before AI. And I'm going to get this a little bit wrong, but I'll get the spirit of it right. So I want to say this is a 10-year-old quote. And Bill Gates looked at a company and he basically said, this is not a platform. You're a platform when the value of the ecosystem built on top of your technology exceeds the value of your technology. And I like that a lot because it does really kind of quantify, I think, the challenge that we have in this setup. Do you think that things built on OpenAI are as valuable as AI in the aggregate?
Right now, no. I think it will stabilize over time and it will get there. Because people are always going to want something that's a little bit different, a little more customized to their needs. And I think that there is a place for those thin clients in that particular scenario. Now, those might end up being like agents that people are just creating a ton of those on top of the platform. But I would argue that that's very similar to a lot of other platform technologies out there.
Yeah, I guess mobile is pretty close. But you did a Sam Altman quote right before we got on. I feel like that contradicts your position.
I don't know if it contradicts my position. I think it's just a warning that everyone should heed, especially people that are building AI startups. So there was a talk that Sam gave, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and the first thing he said is GPT-4 is going to be the worst AI that anyone ever uses. And what he means by that is this is going to advance so rapidly that when we look back at this in 6 months, you're going to be like, wow, that thing was so bad. And clearly, right. I mean, right now it seems amazing, but I think what we've seen in the past year, I wouldn't bet against what he's saying. And he followed that up with saying that if they just do their job, OpenAI, they just basically stay on their roadmap, they're going to implement so many of the things that there are companies out there right now trying to implement on top of OpenAI that these companies are going to be like, oh, well, OpenAI killed my startup. And he was kind of saying that it's not their intention, but if they just execute on their plan, that's what's going to happen. And 90% of these different companies out there are just going to disappear because it's going to be a native functionality of the model or of OpenAI.
So don't you feel like it's a little hard to have a platform that's actively killing the things built on the platform?
Well, that's why I think that over time it will stabilize, because I think that there's a lot of companies right now that are essentially plugging holes in the platform. Those are going to become native features, and that's going to give rise to a whole nother set of companies that are going to build on top of those features. So I do think it's a platform right now. I think it's a platform that's changing so rapidly that I would be really, I would just be really careful about building, especially as an enterprise company, building any serious technology where there's someone in the middle between these platforms, between the models and the platform.
So that kind of actually gets us to like how does this relate to content, right? Because like, I mean, obviously we should be bringing everything back to content in this podcast. And I want to go there in a second, but I want to do a couple of the statistics out of this article before we do, because these are fascinating. Ren, do you have the stats right in front of you there? I feel like we lost Ren.
Well,
All right.
I got the article up. I can go down until we get Ren's.
What there was like, how many startups did they say that there have been in the last like 3-4 years?
Hi, I made it.
Oh, you're back. That's good.
I was on mute, like everyone always does. It only
also
took us a couple of
froze.
episodes to get there. Okay,
As
well, here
one
we go. It was from fear. Yeah, so one of the main stats is that investors have poured $330 billion into 26,000 AI and machine learning startups, and like 26,000 of those have been in like the last 3 years, and that's wild.
That's right. So like that's an entire industry basically, right? But it's an entire industry that's just startups, and like what's the failure rate on startups? It's pretty high when startups are just going after traditional, problem solution, like business value type things. But when most of your technology is somebody else's, like I have to believe that the failure rate's going to be higher. So people who are engaging with these startups, like what is the likelihood that startup is going to be there? Like Casey was saying, as a middleman between you and OpenAI or whatever it is in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months.
Yeah. And especially they were talking about, some of the like unit valuations are already folding. Like they were getting billions of, and they're already folding because they're not able to make any money.
So we have overinvestment on a questionable business model. Yeah. So, okay. So then how does an organization go about like trying to engage with this ecosystem, this marketplace, in a way that's sane and relatively safe, without getting caught in, what's just going to be the changing tides of this?
I mean, I think going back to owning your own data, and that doesn't just mean like the documents and things you have, but when we're looking at interfacing with these models, the data gets transformed, it gets annotated, it gets enhanced. And it's kind of similar to like what happened back in the early 2000s with translation companies. So translation companies were preparing all people's data for translation. They were charging a huge amount of money for it. And then there was this big shift towards moving to more structure, enhancing the data in the form that people use it in, and then people owning their own translations. And that can completely flip the table on the whole translation industry, because the customer now owned their translations and they owned all the value around how the data was being managed. And it seems similar to this, where like there's a lot of middleware companies that are saying, hey, we can crawl over your data, we can extract it, we can build knowledge graphs, we can do these things. But every single time your data changes, they have to do that again. And that costs a lot of money, and that is a lot of revenue for those companies. But if you really own that data and you enrich it and you manage it well from the start, you've got reduced chance of lock-in with those middleware companies. You're going to reduce the cost dramatically because you don't have to go to a third party to curate your data every single time it changes. You're going to be able to update your models more frequently because there isn't a big gap of doing the annotation. There's just so many incredible benefits of doing that just mirror back to what happened in the early 2000s with translation vendors as well.
So I want to jump on the first thing you said there, the lock-in piece, because I think this lock-in is a thing that I think is present in every single, software system. I mean, probably really product system, that's ever been deployed. Like vendors always want to try to lock their customers in to some degree or another. I think we're different, but that's a separate conversation. But the thing about that is that the overall incentive to lock people in for most ecosystems, it's always been present. But when you're in a situation where the underlying technology moves so quickly and most of the value is there, your value is being the middleman, which means that a lot of your value realistically comes from lock-in. So like, what levers do they have to pull to lock their customers in and prevent them from going to the next startup that was built in 2 months or whatever on top of, OpenAI or, whatever the new GPT is or whatever that might be. And I think that realistically, the only lever they have is some kind of ownership of your content or data. And what that makes me think is that you should never use any of these technologies as repositories for anything, realistically. Like, I think you should really think that if you're going to a startup, which is primarily an AI startup, that whatever you put in there could disappear tomorrow. Like, I think you have to have that mindset.
Yeah, for sure. And then also recognize the trade-off between utilizing those companies versus investing in long-term, structure of your data. Like,
Totally.
it is a trade-off. Maybe it's a good short-term solution because you have so much information that the investment in structuring it and annotating it well and classifying, et cetera, is just something you can't get to in the time frame you're looking for. But I think it's important that people recognize that that is a trade-off. And because it's a trade-off, if you put all your data into that system, you're just asking for a world of hurt later on, I think.
Yeah, and that world of hurt is interesting in this circumstance because there's so much pressure to move fast in this particular, call it a bubble or whatever it is, this new world, this new marketplace, that it's very natural, very human to not think about like, okay, what if this fails? What if this doesn't pan out? And so, I mean, we kind of actually saw this a little bit with wikis in the beginning of the pandemic, where, like structured content in and of itself is always a long-term solution. It's something that you build because you expect it to be foundational for information retrieval and distribution over a long period of time. But it's much harder to set up than like a wiki. A wiki you turn on and people start dumping things in there. So that was a great solution for when people were next to each other in cubicles and all of a sudden they weren't. They needed a way to basically like bridge that gap. But wikis are now the wiki cycle. I don't know if we've talked about the wiki. We should do a wiki cycle. I think we did a components in the wiki cycle. It's about 3 to 5 years because when people just dump things in there, they dump so much stuff it becomes hard to find the things you actually need. That's the wiki cycle in like a really brief way. But in this, like, this is another kind of like, oh crap moment where people are just blitzing. The difference here is that by and large, wiki companies are pretty stable. So the problem that you have is like you have to find a way to get it out. They're not going to just disappear on you. But it's kind of a similar situation. So if you end up at the end of this and at the AI cycle, and all of a sudden you can't get your information out, you're going to be not only are you going to be behind where you wanted to be, but because you didn't do any of the work to enable that in the first place, you're behind the people who did it the right way. So it's like a double whammy.
So is this like?
Go ahead, Ren.
Sorry, I know I was talking to Jared the other day, and he was saying how we had a lot of people coming to us and talking about structured content for the first time because they want to start getting into AI and they want to start adopting it, and they're realizing that if they really want to set it up foundationally, it needs to be structured content. So is that kind of what you're saying is like, not only do you not need to keep your stuff in an AI repository or whatever, but you need to like all needs to be ready to move to whatever.
Yeah.
Or am I just way off base?
Basically, so we for a long time, structured content was the backbone for like multi-channel publishing, and multi-channel realistically meant PDF and web. There's other channels, but like, in a very broad sense, like everybody wanted PDF and web. I think what people are looking for now, maybe they're not asking for it in these words, but they're looking for the ability to have multi-model publishing. And it's for a number of reasons. One is like, what if your model disappears or the middleman between you and your model disappears? You better be able to like quickly reinflate on something else that provides similar business value. It's also like, what is it? Every week we get a new iteration on an open source model or a closed source model or an OpenAI model or something like that. Like, what if your particular use case, there's a bespoke model that comes out that deals with that better, and you want to be able to test that so that you can have a substantial reduction in your error rate or whatever it may be. So like the testability of your publishing is also needs to be multi-model in terms of what it is. So this old thing, this old structured content, multi-channel publishing is now necessary to keep pace in terms of anything which is customer facing, anything which is information based through like multi-model publishing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
A super simple version of this is I don't know who follows Lance Cummings on LinkedIn, but I saw a post from him a couple weeks ago where he changed the entire way he was setting up his. I hope I get this right, and if I don't, sorry, Lance. Where he changed the entire way he was setting up his AI bots or like little services or whatever he was creating, and he said it reduced his overall need to do prompt engineering by some large number, call it 80%, by breaking them out and making them very purpose-built. So what he did was he changed his publishing strategy. Like this wasn't AI stuff. This was literally a change in publishing strategy to get a large factor improvement in the overall efficacy of his AI systems. Now, Lance is like super advanced with this stuff, but that's really kind of where everybody needs to be. So yeah, so it's interesting and kind of scary times in these ways because like there's so much risk in not doing it and so much risk in doing
it. We always end on you should be scared of AI.
Don't panic, volume 4.
Don't panic, but maybe panic a little.
A little bit.
Yeah, I really didn't want to do like anything on AI this week, but it just came up so many times throughout the week. It was like so top of mind. Even I went to like a dinner earlier this week, and I was talking to somebody that had a company that they had started, which was largely built on AI. And the whole conversation was about like, how defensible is this? Like, can you get to a place where like this is actually sticky because your actual stack is there's not that much value in your stack. And I'm seeing that really regularly when I talk to other, CEOs and people who are building things. So it's a totally different conversation than we've had, at the kind of startup level for a long time. But it affects everybody. Like you have to be able to leverage it, but also defend yourself from the downsides.
So 6 months from now, we're going to come back to this episode, see how it shakes out and where we're at.
6 months, it might be a little bit longer. I think the winter is coming, but it's not going to be here in 6 months. Who knows? I could be wrong about that.
I mean, winter didn't come on Game of Thrones for years and years and years. So
I know
that could be us.
I'm just going to post on LinkedIn once a month, winter is coming with like ChatGPT in the background or something.
Perfect.
Like Sam Altman in a Game of Thrones outfit.
I'll take that.
At the wall.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good. I don't know why I haven't done that yet. That's a great meme.
You should get AI to make that image for you.
That is what I'm spending the rest of my day on now.
Okay, yeah, have fun. Well, we'll post that as soon as Patrick has it. This has been a great conversation. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back next Friday with more maybe AI content, maybe more content.
We're going to take the week off from AI. We'll talk about something else next week, but definitely it'll be about content.